We are making our own story as we go, as we go, as we go. Hoping, we are hoping that we'll go so happy ever after, happy ever after.
Hi, I'm Kathy Piech-Lukas, host of Your Dream Day podcast. Thank you so much for joining today. We have a special treat. We are going to talk about photography with Nicole Hupp of Off the Film Photography. Before we get started, I want to give a couple of shout outs. One to Dahlia Vintage Rental for giving us this beautiful set and this gorgeous furniture. If you're looking for some really great antique accents for your wedding, be sure to check them out, Dahlia Vintage Rental. But Nicole, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
I know. So we've been talking, we were chit-chatting before we started hitting record today. And we were talking a lot about just photography and photography trends. Like, What are some things that you're seeing from your couples when it comes to photography?
So I would say our couples personally are still more into the timeless classic vibes.
Mm-hmm.
They want the photos that 20 years from now, when their grandkids are looking at their album, they're not like, oh my God, that was so 2020.
Look at the puffy sleeves.
Yeah. More of like, oh my God, you look gorgeous. Versus some of the more common trends we're seeing is like the super harsh flash, almost reminds me of like 90s. Blurry photos are in, believe it or not.
Oh, I can take those.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want my fuzzy photos.
Yeah. Blurry photos are in, and a lot of photographers have joked like, oh, hey, photos from when I first started working I can bring out.
Oh, no.
Well, yes, blurry photos have a great spot if they're movement and stuff. They can be really nice, but, and I have photographer friends who love them, and that's like, they're so excited. So it's kind of really, there's everything out there, but those are the two biggest trends right now.
So what exactly is that flash that you're talking about?
Yeah, so with a lot of photographers, you'll see very soft lighting or very distinct lighting. This flash is literally, think about the old Polaroid cameras where they just had that flash right on top and they took a picture and you have that dark shadow here, that dark shadow behind you, and you're like washed out, really pale.
Okay.
So it's just that very bright, in-your-face flash.
Like the POW.
Yes. Like all those old cameras we took, and it was like, Pam, here's your white light. Like, you're a ghost, and everything behind you is super black.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yes.
So, like, when you shoot weddings, what are some of the things that you as a photographer find are most critical to making your day flow smoothly?
Obviously, a sound timeline. Our brides don't know how long photos take. Early in my business, I had one bride hire me, and this is before I did timelines. I was new in it. I didn't know everything. And she was like, oh, here's a list of like 30 photos I want of family members. Okay. And then we were talking about our timeline. I'm like, well, what time's your ceremony? She's like, 6 to 7. It was a Catholic mass. And I said, okay, what time's your reception? 7:30. And I was like,
that's not going to happen.
I was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, how long from the reception to the church to the reception? She was like, it's a 20-minute drive.
Oh,
Okay.
boy.
What time do you want to be announced? 7:30.
That's not realistic.
Yeah. So, I mean.
Well, because for one, is it a Catholic mass or is it a Catholic ceremony?
Right.
Because they're two completely different things. Like a Catholic ceremony is not going to have the Eucharist part in it.
Right.
And that part alone takes up 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're having a full Catholic mass, you should allocate at least an hour, if not an hour and 20 minutes. Depending on how long-winded your the homily is by the priest.
Right.
So, that's just like, that's just a Catholic mass. Like if you have an Indian ceremony, depending on whether it's, Northern Hindu, Southern Hindu, Sikh, Jain, whatever, you might be looking at 2.5 hours for that ceremony. And that's just the ceremony part. That's not getting your guests out of the sanctuary so that you can take pictures. Because usually it takes about 10 to 15 minutes just to get the guest escorted. I don't even know if escorted is the word. Shuffled out is probably a better
making their way out of the venue.
There we go. But it takes time to get them out because some people will have that after ceremony shot where maybe they have bubbles or wands or, something where they have a grand send off and they drive around the block and come back and then guests know that that's their cue to go to the reception.
Exactly.
That alone takes 15 to 20 minutes. And then you have to go back inside and get, the couple with bridal party, couple with parents, couple with grandparents, and it takes time.
Yeah, we say so we do ask our clients for a formal family photo list. And they'll provide us, and we say try to keep it about 10 groupings because we say for 4 or under people, allow about 3 minutes per grouping. 5 or more, allow 5 minutes per grouping.
Oh, that's great advice.
So if you literally have 8 shots of like 20 people, I mean, that's 5 minutes per shot minimum. And so it adds up quickly. So, that's what we always tell them. These are kind of the timelines it takes me. Now, if I do bride and groom with parents, like mom and dad of the bride, a lot of times they'll say, okay, I'll take groom out and do bride with the parents. And then I'll say, dad, step aside, mom, and then dad. So yes, I can get a lot done, but it takes a good 3 minutes between transitions. So,
well, and I think the trickiest thing with photographers and timeline is if, like, say you have a bride and her bridesmaids who are getting their hair and makeup done, you need to make sure you have enough artists to stay on timeline. So just like a little bit of KPL advice. If you have 7 bridesmaids and a bride, each application being one application is a face, one application is an updo. You have to allow 20 to 30 minutes for each bridesmaid's application. The bride, you have to allow at least 45 minutes to an hour per application. Right. And so you need to allocate how many artists do you need? You might need 2 artists to get done in 3.5 hours.
Right.
If you got 7 people in your bridal party and 1 hair and makeup artist, you're going to be getting ready for 5 to 6 hours. Yeah. And what ends up happening is when you have a bridal party that doesn't allocate that, then it falls on the photographer because they are the ones who have to make up all the time.
Exactly. And I will say most of our timelines get behind because of hair and makeup or dress malfunctions.
Dress malfunctions. Oh, yes.
We've had the brides, we've had mother of the brides. Bridesmaids have literally shown up to their bridal suite to get ready with their bridesmaid's dress in a ball thrown on a table.
What?
Yes. And I'm sitting there like, oh, the bride is supposed to be getting in her dress now. So of course, they're steaming and all this. So those timelines will typically get behind on those main things. It's that prep. If a bride or a groom and they can be on time or close to time with that, then the day usually is fine. Even if we get behind, maybe the family photos take an extra 15 minutes, we've got enough buffer room in other areas, but it has to start on time. If that wedding gets off, then it's so hard to make up.
Well, and typically the first shots that you do when you get there are detail shots.
Right. So so for our 8-hour day weddings or longer, we say about the first 45 minutes is we'll come in, we'll do the details, we'll grab some of the bride getting ready. We don't get a ton of those because while they're fun, brides don't use those. Except for they'll look at them once and they'll go, oh, okay.
And they go pretty quick because usually they're just them recreating, putting on lipstick or...
Yeah, absolutely. Like we always tell the bride when you see us, that should be a cue that most of your bridesmaids should be ready. And then in the next 15, 20 minutes, they should be getting dressed. And then you should be pretty much almost done. We'll come up the last 5 minutes, grab, the iconic hairspray shot or the lipstick, the final applications, because none of our brides in their albums will ever use a pre-makeup, pre-final hairdo photo in their
True, that makes sense.
in their photos.
Well, they don't want to see themselves in rollers.
No. And it's like, those are fun. And those are cell phone pictures that their girls can take throughout the day. You'll still have those memories, but you don't necessarily need the professional side of it. There are certain things you don't need professional photos of.
Well, and like, also what's nice is when the photographer, their first photos are the detail shots. I always tell the bride, hang up your dress as soon as you wake up. Like if you're getting ready in the hotel, or as soon as you get to the place where you are getting ready, take it out of the bag, let it breathe, because, even though it may have been steamed, being in that dress, it is going to wrinkle a little bit, and let Mother Nature, let Sir Isaac Newton, whatever you want to call it, let nature take care of getting those wrinkles smoothed out.
And a lot of the stuff, and I know some brides really stress about wrinkles, if their dress is very detailed or has like tulle or really designs, you're not going to see the wrinkles as much as you think.
I agree.
Now, if you're wearing a very satin fitted dress, those are the ones you're going to make sure that are perfectly steamed beforehand.
Well, and there's some fabrics that no matter how much you steam it's going to wrinkle naturally because it's very conducive to wrinkling.
Exactly.
And there's only so much you can do with that.
Right. Yeah. I always recommend, why the bride's getting ready, the mother, the bride, or whomever's helping, if it's a planner like you, like, hey, just make sure this is steamed.
Yep.
We always say by the time we come to, when we show up, which is about 45 minutes before the bride is getting in her dress, that point, her bridesmaids should be mostly ready, getting ready to do. Mom of the bride should be pretty much ready. Yeah. The bride should be final touches. And if for some reason the bride hasn't even sat in that makeup chair, which has happened, whoever's in that makeup chair or that hair chair needs to be kicked out, and focus needs to be on that bride.
Yeah. Well, and even with the timeline too, if mom is getting makeup done, or like put mom after the bride.
Yeah.
Because the bridesmaids and, the bride need to get their makeup done first so that they can go off for pictures. And then, mom, usually the parent pictures aren't until a little bit later anyway.
Yeah. The only thing is sometimes our brides do like mom helping her in the dress. So mom still wants to look nice too.
That's true.
So I think it depends on and that's where we'll talk to our couples and we'll say, okay, who is helping you in your dress? And if they say mom, then we're like, okay, when we show up, mom should be hair and makeup done. You should be sitting in a chair getting your stuff done, but mom should be done. And then the bridesmaids, if they're doing a robe shot or the pajama shots, matching PJs, then yes, they should be kind of put together. They don't have to be finalized. Because if you do a first look too, our bride and groom, we do like 45 minutes of like prep and details, and about half an hour-ish for the bride to get in her dress. And then we spend about 45 minutes or an hour is kind of by the time everything's done, doing bride and groom portraits if they're doing a first look. Then the bridal party has a whole hour to finalize what they need to do.
Oh, that's true.
So they don't even necessarily need to be ready at the time of the first look. They just need to be put together enough that for like the bridal, the matching robes or PJs, they look semi put together. They don't have to be finalized.
What are some of the worst like wardrobe malfunctions you've had with the bride? I've had lots with bridesmaids, but like what's probably the craziest one you've ever had?
It is the one we worked together. I would say being sewn into her dress. Beth. I love that. Using dental floss to sew her into her dress.
Yes,
but it works.
I'll tell you. Well, I learned that trick because I had a wedding. A prior wedding where it wasn't the bride, it was the bride's maid, and she had a dress that all of myself and all of the bridal party felt must have been 2 sizes too small, because we were literally, there were 3 of us pushing this zipper together and then another one pulling it up, and we barely got it on her, and then it split like that. And there was, you can't fix that.
No.
And so we literally took dental floss, and I reverted back to my 7th grade home economics class. Thank you, Mrs. Unoni, for teaching me a blanket stitch. And we literally sewed her in with dental floss, and then we had nail polish that matched the dress, and we painted it in that color nail polish so you couldn't even tell that it was dental floss with a mega stitch. And we told this girl, we said, on the party bus, you are not allowed to sit down. You are to stand up until after the ceremony is over. And we had a little, they had little shawls. So we told her, here's your shawl. Keep this handy in case it pops. And it actually helped the whole night.
Nice.
We were shocked. But when that happened at the wedding we had together, one of the bridesmaids was a seamstress,
which worked out perfect.
Which worked out beautifully. She had experience in doing costumes, and so she didn't know that it was a collaboration because she didn't know about the dental floss trick.
Right.
But she had a bigger needle than I had in my emergency kit, so it ended up being a group effort. But we got her in.
Yes.
And it lasted the whole day.
Yep. I wonder if Adam had to sit there and cut.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
I mean, the other worst one I had was the bride's dress became too small. It was probably a size too small, and they were running out of the corset for the back.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and she was such a sweet bride, and unfortunately, it was so tight that it wasn't necessarily as flattering from the back. Mm-hmm. So there was not a lot of pictures from the back of the dress.
Well, and like the dress is so tricky because when most brides will purchase their dress at least 6 to 9 months out because it takes that much time for it to arrive. Because when they order a dress for you, it's custom fit to your measurements. It's not like if you buy one off the rack, that's another story. But if you're ordering a dress, that's made specifically for you. So if your weight fluctuates, you can take a dress up or down 2 sizes, but that's about it. So once you do that final fitting, these are real world stories about why it is so important after that final fitting that you have to maintain that weight. And you'll naturally lose weight the month before your wedding due to stress. Mm-hmm. That's not doing extra miles of running or extra miles of swimming or extra sit-ups. That's just natural stress because you're planning the biggest day of your life.
Yeah.
And
so far.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I speak from personal experience. I lost like 10 pounds before the wedding day after my final fitting. And it got too small up here. So I had to buy another strapless bra to
lift them up a little.
Lift the girls up a little bit so that I wasn't falling out of my dress. Which, there are things that, you can do very last minute if you have that problem. But luckily I was able to fix it with just a different undergarment.
And a lot of times brides don't think about this too, is when you're doing your fittings and they're, pulling and tucking, sit down in your dress.
Yes.
Because a dress, clothes tend to fit more snug standing up than when you sit down. And I mean, you sit down, you kind of expand a little. It's natural.
Yep.
So it's like, so many brides are like, how am I going to sit in this dress? And I'm like,
I tell them to eat a big lunch.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you got to think about after you will eat at your wedding, or at least if you're on Dream Days watch, you will eat at your wedding because you are not going to pass out on my watch. Yeah. I'll literally schedule in feeding times in the timeline. Yeah. So in the morning while they're getting their hair and makeup done, I'll have breakfast, whether it's just like a fruit tray, Panera bagel pack, orange juice, champagne for mimosas. Right. But you have to eat something because you will forget to eat because the day it's a whirlwind. And that's where your vendors come in because they have the timeline. You're on their timeline that day.
Right.
And if you don't eat, you'll forget. And then the next thing you know, you're like, whoa.
Yeah. There's been so many times we always have snacks with us. There's always peanut butter crackers, granola bars, stuff like that. And I've walked into so many and I'm like, have you eaten?
Oh yeah.
And they'll be like, oh, I forgot. I'm like, hey, this is what I have. Eat something. You don't even have to eat a lot, just enough because I know. Or I'll be like, do you need water? Do you need this? A good vendor is going to check in on you 30 times that day. Make sure you have water, a drink, you've eaten, all of that.
Yep. Nope. So we always arrange to have breakfast, some sort of breakfast available, whether it be I pick it up or we have room service bring it in. Same thing with a light lunch, but nothing with condiments. You don't want ketchup on the wedding dress. And then even in the party bus, I'll just make sure there's pretzels or just something to nibble on. I usually keep some juice boxes in the car just in case somebody gets a low blood sugar.
Yep. Orange juice and apple juice will spike your blood sugar in an instant.
Mm-hmm. And then like at the wedding, it's hard because everybody wants to come up and congratulate you. And when you're doing that, you're talking. And when you're talking, you can't be chewing. And then the next thing you know, you're like, oh, it's my first dance. And there's your plate of food, not even an eighth gone.
And that's one of the other trends. It's not necessarily a photography trend that's coming up, is a private dinner. And I love that.
Yes.
Because as a photographer, we do not want to take pictures of people eating. Only cute pictures of people eating are like the 1-year-old baby with spaghetti all over their face. Guests do not want their pictures taken while they're eating. We love when, and it also helps with the overall reception timeline. Like your guests can eat and you're eating at the same time, but it also gives that couple like those moments of just them or just them and their bridal party, because I've seen it both ways. And I've had so many couples say this was like the best thing we did. Yep. It gave us a few minutes to like, be like, holy crap, we're married. You're my husband. And no one's staring at us. And we get to eat. And, you know, I can put 12 napkins over me while I'm eating and not feel judged, you know. So I do love that. And I wish more brides would do that. Because like you said, our couples, they're eating and everybody wants to talk to them. And you're like, just let them eat food.
Yes. Well, I mean, I can give a shout out to, you know, one of my couples, Kieran and Debbie. They were the first ones who said, we don't want to go to cocktail hour. We want to eat our dinner during cocktail hour. And I said, that's a brilliant idea. And so we did it and it worked out great. And the primary reason we did it was that that particular bride was she was prone to her blood sugar dropping very quickly. And so we needed to we had a lot of like snacks scheduled for her throughout the day to make sure that she, you know, didn't get weak. And they enjoyed their dinner. They ate it at their own pace. And we had plenty of time to get their after ceremony pictures done. They had a good 30 minutes to eat their dinner. And then during dinner, they were able to go around to every single table and talk to all the guests and not feel like they were shoveling food in as quickly as they could. And they actually enjoyed their meal.
I think couples need to, I love a lot of those traditions. I mean, some of them I hate, but most of them I love. There's always those few you're like, oh, no. But I think couples forget too, this is like their day. They need to schedule time for like them. One of the things I saw on either Instagram Reels or TikTok was a bride was talking about how like the moment right before she walked down the aisle, she got lined up in the aisle and she just stood there for like a good 20 seconds, just taking in before she walked down the aisle that she was literally about to go get married. You know, it's not a race. It's your day. So you know what? If you're supposed to have first dance at 7 and you don't do it till 7:15, nobody knows. And it's okay. You know, find time to be with like your significant other, because we hear all the time from brides, like as soon as they hit their first look, they're like, you're leaving? Where did my day go? Because it is so jam-packed. So finding
and it flies. Your wedding day will fly.
Yeah. But if you've spent, you know, 12, 15 months planning something, 8 hours, 10 hours is not that much time in the grand scheme of like the wedding process. So we always say if there's moments that you can find that you just sneak in just those few moments of the two of you, like a private dinner or a private last dance, or, you know, we had a couple a few weeks ago, it ended up raining on their wedding day and they're like, you know what, we just rather do more pictures after the ceremony. We're just going to go upstairs and hang out with our friends. And you know what? As a photographer, it felt really weird because there was nothing for me to photograph. But I knew also that my couple was okay with that. And so I literally just sat there eating my peanut butter crackers.
Well, and like as a vendor team, you know, our job is to guide the couples. But, you know, if like, let's say you have a sunset shot scheduled, and you cannot change the sunset. That is set in stone. So if it's 8:45 and the sun is setting and you go up to the couple at 8:30 and say, hey, it's 8:30, the sun sets in about 15 minutes. Do you still want to do your sunset shot? If they don't want to, that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're fine with that. I mean, we take our direction from you. The only time when it can get a little bit tricky is if you have a buffet or, you know, meat in particular. and you're more than 20 minutes behind on your schedule, it can start to impact the quality of your food, because your food will continuously be cooking from the time that it leaves the caterer's kitchen to the time that it arrives at the venue.
Absolutely.
So you have to be careful if you go maybe like 20 to 30 minutes off schedule. The minute you know that you're behind schedule, or you anticipate it's going to be behind schedule, have somebody let the caterer know as soon as possible.
Right. And for us, the way we work, we always build in like 10, 15 minutes extra. Like we'll say, oh, we're going to set up for the first look. We allow 15 minutes for it. If it's at the venue, it's not going to take us 15 minutes to walk from this door to that door.
Right.
But we're like, you know what? If it took her 5 extra minutes because she all of a sudden realized, oh crap, I got to figure out how to use the bathroom in my wedding dress.
Oh yes, that is a group effort. You will definitely have a whole nother bonding experience with your girls that day.
Girls, so definitely go to the bathroom right before you put it on.
Now we know why girls go to the bathroom in groups.
Yeah.
It's because of their wedding day. They're practicing.
We learned. It's like, always go right before you put on your dress, and then I always tell them to walk into the toilet, not try to turn around like we normally do. And they look at me weird, and I said,
just trust me on
trust
this
me,
one.
otherwise you put the dress over your head. But yeah, so we always build in those 15 minutes, and I tell couples, like, yeah, we allow 45 minutes for a first look. A good photographer, or a well-trained photographer, I should say, I can get every shot that my couple would need within like 20, 25 minutes. Mm-hmm. Like I can get what I call the mom and dad shots. I can get the romantic shots, the fun shots, the walking, the veil. Like I can do all that if I only have 20 minutes.
Right.
But I do 45 because inevitably it never ceases to happen that I'm texting Ryan the day of the wedding like, hey, we're running late. And he's like, yep. But I know that happens. So when I say 45 minutes and I'm like, yeah, I'm really going to have about 30. I'm okay with it because I've trained myself to be able to work that way.
Well, and it's the same thing here from the planner side. I always pad the schedule, always, because I would rather like one time I had a couple that was an hour ahead of schedule. Never had that happen since, but they were an hour ahead of schedule. And it was through the years, there have only been 3 things in my emergency kit that I did not have. One time I did not have eyelash glue. I did not have breast pads because I didn't even know what a breast pad was because I've never had kids. And then they wanted like decks of playing cards because we were an hour ahead of schedule and they wanted to play euchre.
Why not?
But I mean, it's very, very rare to have an extra hour like that. Usually you're either trying to make up time or you're right on schedule. And if you're right on schedule, it's usually because your vendor team has padded the schedule, knowing that you'll probably be a little bit behind. So, make sure that you try to, don't say that you're going to, it takes 20 minutes to get from the church to the reception and I'm going to be introduced the minute I get there, because that's never going to happen.
What about bustling the dress?
You got to bustle your dress. You've got to exit the vehicle. You're going to have people come up. And there's always going to be 1 or 2 people that find you and congratulate you and want to have a conversation with you. And the DJ has to, or the band leader, whoever you have, has to go up and down and make sure that you guys are in the correct order. And are we saying your name right? All of that takes time.
Yep.
You're not going to just hop out of the car and just get introduced right into the reception.
Absolutely.
It's not realistic.
No. And anytime it's like a 20-minute drive, we say, okay, so 30 minutes, because we're assuming you hit every single red light as soon as it turns red.
Well, not only that, if you have a limo or a party bus, if you go on Waze or Google Maps and you calculate and Google Maps says it takes 20 minutes, you actually have to add extra time because larger vehicles actually take longer.
Yep.
And, that's another thing that couples don't take into account, which a good transportation company will take that into account.
Right.
As long as they're not just somebody who decided to buy a limousine and now they're a limo company.
Right. That's having established trust that vendors make a huge difference. I feel like on a wedding day, like someone who has been there, done that, has dealt with, oh, what if it rains on my wedding day? What about my pictures? What if this, what if that? And I'm like, okay, absolutely. Those are all valid concerns.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's, I always tell, if you hire a photographer who's done weddings or been around, they're going to know. We had one this year. She texted me. She's like, they're saying rain on my wedding day. And I said, well, I got clear umbrellas. I'll bring them. Mm-hmm. And literally we discussed her comfort level with the dress pre-wedding. And she was like, I really don't want to get it wet. Absolutely. I tell you, I was standing in the rain. My assistant was holding an umbrella. I have them in the doorway because I could see clearly after it stormed a dry patch. So I knew if I had them in that doorway, A, it's really pretty there, and B, she's not in the rain.
Right.
And I was able to do that. So we didn't necessarily utilize the full time, but we utilized some of it so they got some additional photos.
Nice.
And then, ones where her eyelash started falling off after the ceremony. So she was running to go get that fixed.
The eyelash glue.
Yeah.
I have that now.
Yes.
I didn't at that one.
It's great for necklaces too. I don't know if you've seen that. Like you take the clasp and you put a little bit of eyelash glue and you glue their clasp down and you glue their charm down and their necklace won't move the rest of the day.
You heard it first.
Yes.
Nicole Hupp, tip of the day.
Yeah, I seen that either on TikTok or Instagram and I was like, and I've seen brides do it and it will keep it right there and you don't have to worry about, is my necklace turned or anything like that.
That's a great tip.
Yeah, but while she was going to go get her makeup fixed, I was like, I looked at the groom and I said, is your side of the family here? Because it was right after the ceremony. He's like, yeah, they're all here. I was like, you know what? I know we had talked about starting with her side. Let's start with your parents and just you solo shots because we can work on those while she's doing that. Yep. And we're, going to utilize the time. We're going to get quicker. We're going to make it up. Because I look at it this way. If I can get through family formals quicker, I get more time with my couple to do what makes me happy and create that magic.
Yep. Well, and you bring up another really good point about the timeline. And there have been times where I've had to throw the timeline out the window because of just circumstances that have happened. One time I had a couple who the bridesmaids were getting ready in Morrow, which was about 45 minutes from where the ceremony site was in downtown Centerville, which is in the Dayton area. And they were supposed to grab the groom's tuxedo on their way out, and they forgot. And we literally had to send the limo driver back with a family member who was not a bridesmaid to go to the house, pick up this tuxedo, and bring it back, which, do the math, that's an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And so we figured it out about 45 minutes before the ceremony started that we did not have a tuxedo for him. So what we did was we bumped up cocktail hour, turned it into a welcome reception.
Nice.
And that killed about an hour and a half of the time that we needed to get the attire, get him changed, and then start the ceremony. So we just flipped it around, but otherwise, guests would have been sitting there for an hour and a half, twiddling their thumbs. I mean, and sometimes we're going to go back to the whole, sometimes we get behind schedule because you might have not enough makeup artists and hair designers doing the bridal party. Sometimes the bridal party will be behind schedule and it might make more sense to start the men. Yeah. And let the ladies finish their hair and makeup and just flip-flop the two. Because the men, all they have to do really, I mean, let's face it, it takes 10 minutes to put on a tuxedo.
And pro tip, every groom shot is faked with getting ready.
Yes, all they're doing is putting the jacket on.
No groom is sitting there waiting for the photographer to come to tie his shoes. My husband unties their shoes, makes them tie it, unties their shoes, makes them tie it. So all those,
so hopefully they don't need Velcro shoes, otherwise they'd be in trouble.
They have Velcro, we typically don't do that, but all those beautiful Pinterest shots that you see, they're fine, they're great. They're never natural for the guys, because guys don't do that typically. I don't want to say every guy, I'm sure there's some guy out there who does, but we had one wedding where the bride was 2.5 hours late. And this also is a good point for us, we always know what is a high priority for our couples. Like, if our couples are like, our bridal party is like a huge priority, we make sure like we include plenty of time with them. This couple, they booked us because we had shot a wedding at the venue they were getting married at. They saw the first look of that couple and the bride was like, I want that. I want a first look. Never had heard of it, never had seen it for her. So when we talked and we figured out the timeline and she kept saying, I love the first look. I hope he cries and all this. And so we were super excited. She was 2.5 hours late. You want to talk about a timeline killer? Whew, 2.5 hours late. Felt horrible for the poor groom because he's sitting there and we're like, at this point we'd already done all, like the groom and the groom's guys, just his solo pictures. I didn't have any of the details because it was all with the bride. So I couldn't even be doing detail shots at that point or nothing.
Wow.
I sat on a wall for about an hour because I didn't have anything to do. And I kept checking in like, hey, how's it going? How's it going? So she finally showed up, and it was probably 45 minutes to an hour before the ceremony. And the first thing she, like as soon as she came, Ryan grabbed, because I told him like, you need to grab her dress, grab all her details, take them to this room. I'm going to do the bare minimum, so I'm just going to capture them before at least she puts them on. So she has them.
So when you say details, what are you specifically talking about with details?
Yeah, so usually this is the bridal details. So it's like her hair pieces, her shoes, jewelry, rings, dress, all the stuff that she's going to wear.
So those are things that you would recommend a bride pull aside on the wedding day, have those ready to go for your photographer.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we're a little extra, and we actually send our couples about a week before a bag that has the bride's name and it says, I survived wedding planning. And then we throw in a little like cheat sheet, like checklist, like, hey, these are your bridal details. So the idea is like, hopefully they put them in there or put them in something that I can just grab. And go. But yeah, anything like, and usually they won't put their engagement rings. The main ones that are typically forgotten are the invitation.
That makes sense.
And both rings, because they give the bands to the groom. So I'm usually hunting those down. But I do try to reiterate, like, hey, bring these, grab these.
And put your invitation in a Ziploc bag.
Yep.
Like just before you mail any of them out, pull one aside, put it in a Ziploc bag, and that's the one for your photographer, because then that way you don't have to worry about fingerprints getting on it or any rain or anything like that.
And if it's like a two-sided invitation, so if like one side is like decorated or has them, and the other side's like the information, do two invitations, because then we can do
you could do the
both
back
sides. Yeah.
Oh, that'll be neat.
But I also ask my brides to mail me one.
I do too.
So I will physically bring the invitation with me. Some of my brides will put them in. I recommend this. They put them in an envelope instead of just mailing the actual one. But or if we do an in-person meeting, I just ask them to bring it to the meeting to save them postage. But since COVID, we do a lot more virtual.
Well, and it's like you put so much effort into creating a beautiful invitation. It's like, get a nice picture of it.
Right. And it's the first impression all your guests have of your wedding.
True.
Like when you send that invitation, that's the first thing that your guests are going to know. They're going to know, are you having more of a rustic wedding? Are you having an elegant wedding? That lets them, they should take that in consideration when they're picking out their clothes.
Oh, absolutely. If it says black tie, you know that as a man, you're going to have a tuxedo. You're not going to have a suit.
Right. Or you're not showing up in a polo and shorts. If you are, you'll probably be turned away.
Or given the look.
Yeah, like,
what are you wearing?
Yeah. And we actually, this year, we had one bride put in dress code recommendations. So she gave the color palettes of her, like the 3 different color palettes her guests could choose from.
That's actually really nice. I like that.
She, said she was very specific. They're more of a conservative couple, so their directions made a lot of sense. Like she said, do not wear stilettos. And part of it was she's like, you will be walking in grass to get to the ceremony. So she let her guests know, like, stilettos, you're not going to work. She asked.
In general, for any outdoor wedding, I don't recommend heels, period. I mean, because if it rained at all the day before,
you're sinking.
You're going to sink.
Yeah. She had she said she wanted all dresses at least knee length or longer, nothing too low cut, nothing too like flashy, like didn't fit their wedding perfect. And the nice thing is, like, when we did the overall like ceremony shot with all the guests watching them, the colors like just made sense.
It probably looked like a bouquet.
Yeah. We had one person not follow the dress code, and that person stands out like a sore thumb. And so if you are given a dress code, follow the dress code, or you'll be that person. But yeah, so, her now husband was like, you're really doing that. But then after the pictures, it made sense.
He's like, I get it. No.
It was like, as a bride, they spend so much time picking these out. Like, as a guest, you do not want to be that girl either wearing white or wearing bright pink, neon pink.
Yes, please. One time, true story. I had a bride whose sister wore a white dress on the wedding day, and the bride had given me a heads up that this sister had a tendency to want to be the focus of attention, right? And she said, if she pulls anything on the wedding day, because I always ask, how would you like me to handle this? I'm your bodyguard in a way. Right. So you tell me how you want this handled. And she said, I don't want her down here with a white dress on. I refuse to have her here with a white dress on. And so what we did was I went upstairs and I said, your sister is extremely uncomfortable with you wearing a white dress. And we have two options for you. Either you go across the street to the mall and you buy another dress, or you're not welcome downstairs. I was the one that had to deliver that message. And so her dad took her across the street and bought her another dress.
I mean,
and it's just in our United States culture, it's very disrespectful to the bride,
right,
if you are wearing a white dress. Now, there was an article, and I believe it was Olivia Wilde, wore a white dress to a same-sex man's wedding.
Yeah.
And the headline read that she wore a white dress to a wedding, like, oh, but there was no bride.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that's an exception. There's nobody being, wronged in this situation because there's no bride.
We had one too where a cousin wore a white dress, sat on the end near the aisle, and the mom was like talking, and so, and this is where sometimes as vendors we do what's best for our couple, even though it's really awkward for us. Yeah. I went up to the cousin and I said, hey, I see that you're kind of wearing a white dress. This is going to mess with our lighting a little bit. Do you mind moving down a few seats? So unfortunately, I told a lie in a church, but
lightning.
Right. I always joke, like, I walk in, I'm like, okay, I didn't get struck. I'm still in good graces now. But, we always say be respectful of, like, the couple. Yeah. I mean,
it is their day.
Yeah, it is their day. And they put so much effort. And I think for a guest, if you ever reached out to a bride, like, hey, what's the colors of your wedding? If you can't pick it up from the invitation and you find something in that color scheme, they're going to be ecstatic. Like,
that's a great tip.
Like, they'll be like, oh my God, look, you match everything perfectly. Even if they don't ask for that dress code. Like, I think, but I am also seeing another one of those trends is you're starting to see more brides request dress codes, or they'll be like, hey, I want everybody to wear, I've seen where it's like, everybody wear black. You wear a black cocktail dress, you wear a black and white suit. Like, they're getting a little bit more specific in their dresses. And honestly, it makes a huge difference in the pictures.
Yeah. I was going to say, they're actually making the guests part of the event design. Right. Is what they're doing.
And it really makes the difference. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, the one person who wore a red shirt and it wasn't the color stood out amongst the rest. And you want your guests to be seen, but you don't want them to be seen, if that makes sense.
Right. It's like the couple should be the focus of the attention.
Yes. So that's always one of our big things is we always try to focus on them.
What would be the one thing that you would tell a couple who right now is listening to this, watching this, and is in the process of trying to select their photographer? What would be the top 3 tips that you would give them?
So the first tip is I always say go through Pinterest. And I do this myself as a business owner. Go through Pinterest and just pin photos you like. Don't think about it. Don't think about why you like it. If you see something, just like it. Then you're going to go back and you're going to look at it and you're going to start seeing a theme. You're going to see, are all your pictures very bright, very airy, very true to color, or are you going to start seeing those more darker, moodier? So you have to determine what style of photos you like. I'm a very bright, bold photographer. I have a photographer friend who's very dark and moody. We do not attract the same clients because her clients don't want my style. My clients don't want her style because they look so different. So the first thing is definitely figure out what color style you like, because photographers edit a specific way. And a good photographer, a well-established, a well-rounded photographer will look consistent. Like, you can look through their Instagram feed and you can see what to expect. Obviously my summer weddings are going to be a little bit more brighter and airier than a fall wedding just because of colors.
That makes sense.
You're giving me dark purple versus lilac, that's going to photograph differently.
Right.
The second thing is, once you figure out what photography you like, what style you like in general, then talk to them. Like, have conversations with photographers. We're not the photographers for everyone, and we know that. We love our quirky couples. We love our couples that are very joyful. They'll have fun. If I tell them to do a stupid prompt, they're going to laugh at me, but they're going to do it. We're very involved with our couples. Like, we follow them on social media. By me, my husband doesn't do social media.
Nah.
but like I befriend my couples on social media, and then, you know, on the wedding day, they're like, oh my God, I saw that your dog did this. And we have those personal conversations.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think with a photographer, and it's not to be cheesy, but you need to click with them.
Yes.
You really do. Because on your wedding day, you're going to spend just as much, if not more time with your photographer than you do with your new spouse.
Yep. We always say, we're like, you are hanging out with me more than him until you get to the hotel room, and I'm not there because you didn't pay me enough. No. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of the same way with the planner, because like I have a joke that I always tell, and if the couple laughs at it, I know that they're my couple, because I'm very bubbly, very outgoing. I'm a little bit quirky, but that's what makes me unique and special.
Exactly.
And I'll tell them, be like, you have to have a comfort level with me. I'm going to be under your dress before your husband is. Mm-hmm. And if they laugh at it, that's my couple.
Yeah. We always joke.
But I mean, it's true, but it's that little bit hint of Kathy sarcasm that's coming through in that.
Like, my business cards for years, she used to say, I get paid to flash people. And if people hate that, they will not like me.
Right.
And I already knew that. Like, that's just who we are. And so you have to connect. And that's why basically you interview, and then your photographer also interviews your couples. We've met couples, and me and my husband are just like, they're not us. And it's nothing that they did wrong.
It's not personal. It's not personal at all.
But I know walking into their wedding day, I am not going to serve them the way they deserve to be served.
True.
Because at the end of the day, yes, I take the photos and I love sharing them and all that, but these are my couples. These are their first family heirlooms. Your wedding photos are your first family heirlooms. This is the start of your forever. These are what your grandkids are going to look at.
I love that.
Yes. And so,
that's so true.
If I meet a couple and I'm just like, I'm not necessarily as bubbly as you, but I'm a very outgoing person. And if I meet a couple that's really quiet and reserved, they're not necessarily going to feel comfortable with me. And I may scare them a little bit. Versus the one couple a few weeks ago, we were downtown, in the middle of a downtown street, shaking champagne at night and going everywhere. There's couples, so, on their wedding day, we're going to do great.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So definitely interview. And then I would say the third thing is price point. It's hard to think about that, and I hate talking pricing. But we're in a business,
Yeah.
Nike shows you the price, and you either say, I will pay that for Nike shoes, or I won't. There are photographers at every price point. Just know a lot of the strong images you find on Pinterest that you're probably pinning and you're loving are coming from very experienced, very educated photographers. A good photographer is always learning. I, at least 2 or 3 courses a year, I take with other photographers who are better than me, that I strive to be. But I learn something new, or I know where my downside is. And I say, okay, this year, my goal is to learn X, Y, and Z, and every year I get better, which means the better I get, the more educated, the better gear I have, the higher price tag. Yeah. You can find great photographers who are, within a budget at any point. Yeah. But just know they don't have that experience yet.
Well, and, with pricing, that tends to be what makes the difference in a $500 photographer versus an $8,000 photographer. Exactly. And there is a wedding professional for every single budget out there. I always tell people, going broke is no way to start a marriage. No. So set a budget and stick to it. And, what would you say percentage wise people should be spending on their photographer? What percentage of their budget?
I always say half because, No, I'm just kidding. No, I would say you're a good photographer. You're looking probably at 10 to 15%. But I will say that number is super flexible in the sense of, I always say, rate how important your photography is.
I agree.
If you say pictures are huge priority, you may want to bump that up and cut cost other places.
That's what we did. I mean, like now this is going back quite a ways, but when we got married, photography was a high priority for us. And so we spent more like 20% of our budget on photography.
Right.
But that was a priority for us. Whereas like something else like centerpieces for us just wasn't. It wasn't a higher priority. So we had what we referred to as people flowers. So we had, my bouquet, my bridesmaids, the groomsmen, readers. I mean, we had cake flowers, those types of flowers, but we opted for something different for our centerpieces.
Right.
But that was our priority. Everybody's priority is going to be that little bit different. So I always tell them, pick your top 4 things that are really important to you. And then from there, you can scale back on the other things to transfer a percentage up to the other one.
So I think for us, obviously, we spend about a third of our budget on our photographer. And my cake came from Kroger. It was a pre-made chocolate cake. And I'm not a cake person, so I didn't care.
Yep.
And then for our reception, because we had a split day, like we got married one day and had a small intimate dinner, and then we had a reception a few weeks later. A friend of mine did baking on the side just as fun. She made cupcakes for that. But
see, we had a cheesecake wedding cake. That was a high priority. It was such a high priority that we went back every year on our anniversary to get a cake until the shop closed.
So we had at our wedding reception, we had cupcakes for the guests, and then we had a 3-tier cake, which really only the top tier was cake. The other 2 were styrofoam. Because we didn't want to pay someone to cut and serve our cake.
Right.
Because our venue was, you do everything. So I was like, we're having cupcakes. People can come up and grab them.
Yep.
We'll cut a little bit off the top cake, and then we'll just save it for us. Well, we took it home that night. The next day, I wake up, and my cat is sitting eating my wedding cake. So the friend who made my cake, for our first anniversary, she actually made us a new cake with our wedding flavors.
Well, and like that, that could be a whole nother podcast in itself. Like, but there's ways that you can actually preserve your cake top so it actually tastes like wedding cake on your anniversary. And do you get the anniversary cake versus your actual top layer from the day of your wedding? Display cakes. There are bakeries that will rent you a display cake that they have in the shop. And, the cost of a cake does not come from the eggs and the flour and the sugar. It comes from the labor going into designing the cake.
Exactly.
So, but what are some other tips that you would offer to a couple as a photographer?
I would say my biggest one is, as you're figuring out your appointments and stuff, reach out to your photographer. I know we send about 6 months out. We send them a reminder of hey, remember, as you're making appointments, if you need us to put together a mock timeline, let us know. Because the timeline will make or break your wedding day.
It really does.
Especially your photography. And most of our couples have never been married. So they don't know how long things should take. And they're thinking, 10 minutes to do 10 family photos. And I'm just like,
more like 20.
20, 30, depending on how cooperative people are.
True.
So I definitely feel that reach out to your photographer with those conversations. And I would say one of the things that saves our couples a lot of times is the first look. I know some people are still like, no, I wouldn't do that. It's not tradition. Well, it comes from a very dark tradition. So I think having a first look as a new tradition is a really good tradition.
I would say probably about 75% of my couples do a first look where the couple has a private moment together about 4 to 5 hours before the ceremony, and then they get their private moment where they see each other, and that's it. Not like the groom and 100 guests get to see her for the first time. I've also had a first look with Dad.
I love it.
I mean, it's so sweet.
I love all the little different first looks.
Yeah.
I love the daddy-daughter first looks because you either get the emotional dad or you get the goofy dad who goes, and it says a lot to their personality as a father-daughter. So I love those. Bridesmaids reveals are amazing too. Sometimes, I've had brides where their bridesmaid had no idea what their wedding dress looked like. So, the mom and the maid of honor got the bride completely dressed, and then the bridesmaids come in. So those are amazing. So those are things you can add to your day that create moments. And I will say a lot of the moments people see on Pinterest are created. They're not always naturally happening.
Yeah.
The reactions are natural and the responses are natural and true. But most people aren't thinking, oh, I should have my dad stand here while I walk up behind him.
True. It's like we're the structure.
Yeah, we just kind of we create the environment for the moment. So I would say, for couples, just figure out what's important to you and go for it. Do it. It's your day. And as a photographer, we'll capture it.
Nicole Hupp, thank you so much from Off the Film Photography. Thank you so much for coming in today. You had such a wealth of knowledge. Where can people find you?
We are on Instagram and Facebook at Off the Film Photo. We're at offthefilm.com. So,
okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
You.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so that you can hear future podcasts. I'm Kathy Piech-Lukas with Your Dream Day. If you'd like to hear more of our podcasts, go on dreamdaypodcast.com or visit yourdreamday.com. Thanks so much for joining us. Happy planning.